Hello, Nomad Sculpt, and this video is about printable seamless textures. This is a very complex topic and it's hard for beginners to follow this tutorial, I think. It's very useful if you have a basic knowledge of the Nomad Sculpt app. So it's about such textures. So seamless, yes. It's almost impossible to avoid such a seam here, but the rest is relatively seamless. So yeah, and it's not about, this tutorial is not about using a stamp tool. It's about using here textures. So it's only about applying textures and use this as a like a mask on the object, and use this mask to create a pattern on the mesh, a printable pattern. So, but I have to explain a lot. So I turn on the inspect. On the bottom here is the inspect option to see the objects with a UV map. So here this object has a nice clean UV map. You see here this I don't know the name for it. This grid mesh here is straight aligned, and the other meshes here with a UV here is it's a little bit banded, and here the seam is straight, but this mesh is or this UV map is okay, maybe, and here the other UV map, here you see here the UV seams, and when I turn the inspect off, and you see here the applied texture, you see here the problems. Here this is the seam, and when you see here the UV, then the seams follow this structures. So, and here you see an object here with a nice UV map, and here this is the texture you get on this UV map. So, and this is what we need. So yeah, okay, we need an example. I create a new seam and I delete the sphere and I add a cylinder. And so with some objects it's possible to create a nice UV map. So here I adjust the cylinder a little bit so that it looks like this, and I validate this object. So the UV unwrapping you find here in the MISC menu, and here's the normal UV unwrap option, and here is a BFF unwrap option, and you find this option here in the settings debug, and here's add BFF UVs. So when you set the checkbox, then it appears here in the menu on this side here. Okay, so and let's unwrap the UV map of this object here. So you get something like this here, and here you see the seams and something here like this. It's not what we want. So I clone this object and create a second one, and now we change the topology of the object. So for example, let's voxel remesh the whole thing. So when we see here the wireframe at the moment, it's like this. And yeah, it's about 80,000 vertices. Unwrapping should work. Let's unwrap it and see what happens. A few seconds. So this is the UV map with a higher poly count. So here the difference, yeah, let's look at it. Yeah, it's not nice. So let's delete this object, clone the other one. Okay, I use the front view, and now I use the cell mask, rectangular, and I mask the top. Sorry, what happened? So unmask is active and symmetry is active, so I don't use it. So I mask the top and the bottom of the cylinder, and here in the mask, set the thickness here to 0 and turn smoothness here off and use the splitting here, none. So split the objects and I select the outline. So you see here now we have separate objects, and at the moment this one we don't need, I delete it. So okay, and let's unwrap this object here. So unwrap. So now you get a nice and clean UV map. So, and this is what we need. So here you see straight lines. Here on the background, it's this is your map for the UV, and here is the texture applied on this square canvas. So now I turn the inspect off, and now when we apply a texture here, it follows the UV map. So, and for this technique, you only use the opacity channel, or yeah, here. And so let's apply such a seamless texture. So you see here at the moment it's much too big, so you can change the scaling. Like this. Okay, nice. And let's do the same for this object here. So here, okay, we forget about the top and bottom caps. So here you see, here's the seam like this here, and it follows the curve. So yeah, it's not perfect, but if you like it, you can work with it. So it's also possible, oh sorry, not this mesh, to change the rotation here, but I think yeah, the better solution is this one here. Okay. So we need a new example. So I delete this object. So let's create a lathe object. So here is a path. Something like this here. And I validate this object, and I unwrap the UV. So this is what we get. So let's apply a texture on this thing here. So this is yeah, the texture we get. Here you see here, this is not nice, and yeah, and this is not nice. So we can try with trimming and so on, and yeah, but let's try it with the other way. So I use now here add cylinder. So, and I bring my cylinder here in position in the area that I want the texture to be applied. So something here like this. We can use an additive fuse and we can see it here. This is nice. So I validate this object now and I use the trim. Make sure hole filling is off here and trim the top away and the bottom. So now we have such a nice cylinder, and I make it with again opaque. So let's unwrap here the UV map. This is what we get, perfectly and nice. And this object here, we delete the UVs. Okay. So on the outer object, the cylinder, we can place our opacity map. So yeah, let's use this texture, it's nice. So okay, let's change the scaling. I think this is nice. So, and now we want this texture on this mesh here. So there are two ways. So first, a very important step is here in the material settings here. The cylinder is selected. Make sure that two-sided is off. So then it looks like this here. Two-sided is off. And the next step is here, you have to reproject this mesh on the other mesh. So I show here the wireframe, and we need a little bit more vertices here. I subdivide the mesh one time, and here in the MISC menu, here it's possible with a, here reproject, the reproject option here. You can change here the settings and select only the vertices. So now press here reproject. So here in the solo view, you see now the texture is reprojected on the mesh, or on the form of the mesh. So, okay. The next step is we need more poly count, subdivide the mesh a few times, that our cylinder poly count is about 300,000. And the next thing is we need a layer. It's important to have a layer here, add a layer. And this Yeah, it's very difficult. And this here, now it's possible to reproject here the color, only the color here. And now reproject here from itself. So here you can check it if it worked when you press here on the color slot mask, and now you try to adjust the mesh here, then it worked. So it's nice. Okay, now we have the mask on the mesh. We don't need at the moment this opacity map. And now go back to the lace object. And for the lace object, we need more higher poly count. So we can use a voxel remesh maybe, or you can use multi-resolution. So let's use voxel remesh, and now it's possible to use here the reprojection, and now we reproject the mask from the other object. So press reproject. And now we have the mask on this object. Here, and this is a nice example what problems could happen. So here you see the mask here is bleeding, so it's not correct. So, and here it's also not correct. So go a step back, select the cylinder here, and I use the front view. And the problem is the mask here is on the edge of the mesh. So it's bleeding here in this direction or here in this direction when reprojecting. So, and the same here on the bottom. So now we have to use the cell mask, make it unmask it, and create here a small part where you unmask the texture. So now you see here at the edge of the mask there's a white or a blank mesh. So now when you use here the reproject option, so reproject it. So here this works, and there's a small problem here, but we can fix it. So for this vase we only need here we can trim the top off, so we don't need it. So now we have a nice object with a nice mask. So the next step is here, you can use here the gizmo. Sorry. This is our, we only need this one. So this is what you get. Or you can use the opposite direction in this way. So, okay. Or it's possible to invert the mask, so like this. Yeah. And other tool for this is here, you can use here the inflate tool. And so I reset it to default. And the only thing you have to do is change to log radius. So here the stroke setting in this direction. So when you brush now, it works like this. And here you can change the intensity to adjust the offset. Something like this. Okay. And if you need a shell thickness, so you can mask the whole object, extract it in the setting in the negative direction, and extract the mesh. So now you have a nice vase. So this object we don't need anymore, and with a nice printable texture. Okay. So, and yeah, we need examples. So I delete all these objects here. And I add the Mestella's head. So the eyes we don't need. Okay. So let's see the wireframe. Okay. And we use cell mask, polygon, and we mask here a part. Let's say something like this here. Yeah, unmask. Okay. We need more poly count. Multi-resolution, subdivide, subdivide. Yeah, okay. So, okay, a nice mask. So, here in the mask settings, we can set here the thickness to 0, and we can extract here the shell. So extract shell. And if you like, I think you can use here smoothness here, the smoothness slider, and extract. The head mesh here in solo view, you can use here the invert mask option, that you get this mesh here. And the other one is this. Here we want our texture. So at the moment when we look at the UV map, you see here, yeah, there's a seam. So let's check the texture on the mesh. So you see here, yeah, this is not nice. And if you we change the scaling, yeah, here we get a problem. So we need a new UV map. So how to do it? So yeah, there's a few options here. I use here the trim tool. Hole filling is off, and I look at the symmetry at the moment, and when I trim the object, I'm not trimming exactly the center, so something like this here, and make sure that the symmetry is off here. And here in the misc menu, let's try to unwrap the UV map. Yeah, here it's not nice, and yeah. You can try the Unwrap BFF and try this one. Yeah, this looks a little bit nicer, so it's okay. So in the symmetry here, you can mirror from left to right, so you get your mesh again back. Okay, and that's the opacity map, files, and yeah, let's use something here like this. Okay. So check the poly count of the mesh. So at the moment, 43,000. We can use a subdivision more. So yeah, the higher the poly count, the nicer the result. So 600,000. Okay, and don't forget here the female layer we don't need. Add a layer. Always add a layer. And the next thing is the poly count is okay, and now we can reproject. So not the mask, the color. Okay, reproject from itself. So here check the mask, it should work. So we don't need the opacity mask anymore. So now we have our mask on the object. Fine. Okay, then our head mesh. We have, so check the poly count. Yeah, we can go higher. And here's a female layer we can delete. And now reproject here the mask from the other mesh. So, and now press reproject. See what happens. So now the mask is on the object. And here for the other mesh, always check here, check the two-sided here, turn it off, it's better. So reproject from high res again. Oh, sorry. Okay. And now you can use the inflate tool and apply the texture here on the mesh. So if you need the other mesh here, so the inverted mask, so go back and here change here the mask, invert the mask, and go back to the head and reproject again. So now you have the other mesh. Not this. We use inflate. So then you get something like this. And yeah, it's very complex. But if you do it 100 times, you do it blind. So this is about this reprojecting textures on the mesh and yeah, create printable textures. Have fun with sculpting. Ciao.